Thank you very much. It's very nice to be back here at the Cart Before the Horse show. For those of you who haven't heard us say that since 2018, it's something that we always say at the beginning of every single Cannabis Expo. We all know why we call it the Cart Before the Horse show, because trade in cannabis remains completely illegal in South Africa, and cannabis remains firmly in place in the 1991 Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act. But it's not all gloom and doom. You might have heard us speak at the Expo before. You might have heard me ranting about our 10 crisis points, ranting about how much I hate the cops, ranting about the slow pace of reform. But when I was thinking of what to say to everybody today, I decided that what about focus on the wins for a change? What about look over the last year and see the gains that we have made, put a positive spin on it, and give our thanks to all the people who have brought us this far. So in January 2023, we decided to call this year the year of the OG. The OG in cannabis speak is those originals, those pioneers, going back 700 years in Southern Africa for the use of cannabis, the trade and cultivation of cannabis. So this has been the year where we've been saluting the OGs and remembering who got us this far. So here at Fields of Green for All, established in 2013 as the first and remaining only cannabis non-profit company for the legalization of our favorite herb, we concentrate on three main things. We are obsessed with human rights. And those two words, human and rights, need no explanation. We work incredibly hard to promote harm reduction. Now we know with cannabis, harm reduction is a very interesting concept because you have the cannabis plant for harm reduction, for example, getting over the effects of nausea after chemotherapy. Then we get cannabis legalization, reducing the harms of prohibition, stopping the cops from locking us up in cages, allowing a fledgling sector to thrive within our difficult economy. So harm reduction is incredibly important for both of those reasons here at Fields of Green for All. And then, of course, a lot of our time goes to drug policy reform. So those of you who don't know us, always remember these three things that we concentrate on. We don't care how you run your business. We care that we are not locked up in cages anymore, and we care that we are creating a sustainable cannabis industry that is inclusive. And our dear cannabis plant is not the victim of colonial capture, as we're seeing in the rest of Africa. These are great concerns of ours, and you can go to our website and just search for 10 crisis points. Although I'll be focusing on the positive today, none of our 10 crisis points have been resolved yet. But hopefully by focusing on the positive, you will get some insight into what we do here at Fields of Green for All. So we started off the year in January by attending the Cannabis World Trade Travel Fair. This was an enormous online event, and how very, very interesting it was to learn from all these people all around the world who are promoting cannabis and cannabis travel. It was a great way to start the year because it was so positive, it was full of entrepreneurs, it was full of people with all sorts of exciting ideas. And as we eased our way into the beginning of 2023, we also welcomed a new bunch of students from the Chiba Cannabis Academy. Please, I encourage you to go and see their stall. Fields of Green for All works very closely with Chiba, and They are the only cannabis education facility that's fully accredited in South Africa, and their business is not an easy one because it's very difficult to operate a cannabis training facility in an illegal environment, particularly when it comes to funding for these types of businesses. You can't just start a cannabis education facility from nothing. So I really do encourage you to support Chiba Cannabis Academy, and we were very excited to kick off the year with our first round of students who come to the home of Fields of Green for All, which is called the Jazz Farm, out near Lanseria Airport. The students come to us once a week for their farm practical, and we see 3 groups of students a year who do a 3-month course with us that is everything from mindfulness to trimming your weed. Really is a worthwhile course, particularly for young people who haven't traveled this long road with us. Then in March, in February, we got this very exciting email from an NGO in Spain called ICEAS. They are the Institute for Cannabis, Ethnobotany, the Environment and Science. And they don't only deal with cannabis, they deal with all sorts of teacher plants. And they invited me to join them in Barcelona for a cannabis social clubs study tour. And what an amazing experience that was. I was joined by 30 people from 15 different countries. We spent a week in Barcelona visiting cannabis social clubs. Our day would begin at a social club where we would be confronted with amazing coffee, amazing food, amazing weed, just to set the tone for our day. And then we visited various associations, and including the Catalonian Health Authority, including the associations of the various clubs, including the everything that there was to know about cannabis social clubs in Barcelona. It was very interesting to see a lot of Americans in the group, because we know that in America there are no cannabis social clubs. But the problem that they are facing in America is there are no consumption areas. There are pot shops, there are dispensaries, but the Americans never thought of consumption areas. So it was interesting to see the Americans, how they are going to weave this idea of the cannabis social club into their hospitality industry, not into the cannabis industry. They're going to the hospitality industry and they're weaving that idea in. And what was most fascinating for me was to see the development of legalization in the various countries. So America is obviously quite advanced, as is Canada and places like Israel, Uruguay, and so on. But the developing countries each have their very, very own unique formula that they are moving forward with. And we, of course, always feel a kinship with the countries of South America and the Caribbean, because we have this like parallel history. And I was very pleased to meet Alana from Barbados and some people from Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and places like that, where we have this parallel history and we can really learn a lot from each other. So that's a Cannabis Social Club tour was certainly a highlight of my year. Then while I was in Barcelona, I was extremely honored to be invited to the unveiling of a mural at the La Crema Grazia Club. And this mural was painted by an amazing Dutch artist called Mossy Giant. Look him up on Instagram, Mossy Giant. And he's called a giant because he's about this tall. And he constructed this amazing mural called The Grand History of Cannabis. And it was from the Big Bang all the way through to the end of Prohibition. And we were so honored that he included Jules and I in his mural. So that was an incredibly special event in Barcelona. And then to round it all off, I went with 2 of our sponsors, Wesley and Jared, who some of you might know, to Europe's biggest cannabis expo. If you take this Cannabis Expo and you times it by 1,000, you have something called Spanibus on the outskirts of Barcelona. And it is always an exhilarating event, very crowded, full of merch, full of everything you can imagine about cannabis. But that certainly did round off my trip to Barcelona really nicely. Now, we had so much fun in Barcelona, and then I flew from Barcelona to Vienna for some very, very serious meetings. Every March, we meet in Vienna for what's called the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. Now, some people might say, what are you doing traveling all around the world? It's really, really important that we go and learn what is happening elsewhere. But even more important, we need to keep our eyes on what is happening with international law at the United Nations. So since 2016, I've been going to Vienna every March to meet up with our crazy team of activists from the Cannabis Embassy. And these are the people here in the photograph. There's everybody from a 72-year-old psychiatrist from Colorado to a hemp expert from Germany to a drug policy academic from Barcelona. And we make up this group called the Cannabis Embassy. And we are the kind of activist watchdogs, civil society at the United Nations. Next March, I'll be going through to Vienna again. Hopefully taking some of my crew with me so that the year after 2025, they can go on their own and I can like put the baton, because I think I've been to Vienna enough times now. So this year's C&D, I was joined by the head of our legal team, Paul Michael Keikel, and we certainly did have a very informative and constructive week at the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And then in April for 420, I was a bit sad because back in the day, from 2012, Jules and I used to throw a big party on 420 every year. It was called D-Day, and I know that a lot of people who were here experienced D-Day at various venues around Johannesburg, and we certainly do miss them. But right now, Fields of Green for All has a very important mission with our fight for human rights, harm reduction, and drug policy reform. And unfortunately, cannabis culture has to take a back seat because we can't do it all. So we had a very quiet 420 this year in April, and I attended an online roundtable at the Czech Republic. The Czech Republic is the most advanced in terms of adult use cannabis policy reform, and we certainly have made lots of friends from that country along the way. And it was great to discuss our Barcelona tour with the rest of Europe on that round table. So that's what we did for 420 this year. And then in May, wow, what an exciting year it's been. I was invited by my colleagues at the University of Bristol and the University of Cape Town to present on cannabis at the African Futures Conference in Cologne in Germany. It was quite a daunting affair because it was an academic conference. And I have a fine arts degree. I don't have a degree in drug policy. But anyway, off we went. I met my academic colleagues in Germany, and we did a presentation that was absolutely packed to overflowing. The conference was not about cannabis. The conference was about African futures. And you know, while one might go to Europe and one might go to America, one has to bring all of this stuff home. And this year we decided that we really needed to concentrate more on the continent of Africa and making our alliances. We have always had alliances from various countries around Africa, but we needed to ramp up that project. So spreading the word about cannabis in Germany at this academic conference was very exciting. And a lot of people were very surprised to hear what we had to say about drugs and development in Africa. And I certainly learned a lot about all sorts of African literature and art and amazing things in the week that I spent in Cologne. And as you can see there on the picture, those are my drug policy colleagues. We have Mohammed from Senegal, and then we've got Gernot from Vienna, and we've got Neil from the UK, and we've got Clement from Zimbabwe, and then Simon from Cape Town, and myself. And I was the only non-academic in the group, but it certainly was great fun. Then straight from Cologne, I got the train to Paris, because while I was in Cologne, I got a phone call from an activist friend of mine in Paris, and he said, "You've got to come, we've got a chance to speak in the French National Assembly." So this year, the French had an election, and there were some new parties that got seats in Parliament, and one of the left-wing parties decided to resurrect the cannabis legalization project in France, and it was just really good timing. And myself and my dear friends, Kenzie and Farid, presented our work in the French National Assembly. Now, if anybody's ever been to Paris, there's this beautiful, beautiful old 16th century building where they have their parliament. And we were actually, us scruffy activists, were invited there to present to them in Parliament, which was a great honor. And there was about 20 members of Parliament in the room, and they were really listening intently. It was amazing to be able to bring our story from the south of Africa right there into the heart of Paris, and also to bring that experience home to South Africa, to see how the various parliaments work and how the various laws work that helps us navigate this path here at home. Then I got home from Paris, and I wasn't home for not 2-3 days when poof, here comes an invitation to go to a hotel north of Pretoria for what was called the Cannabis Phakisa Action Lab. Now, for those of you who don't know, the office of our president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, has a project called Operation Vulindlela, and Vulindlela means to make way. So this was called the Cannabis Phakisa Action Lab because Phakisa means to hurry up. So the president's office was making the way for all of us to hurry up. There were 100 of us invited guests north of Pretoria at this hotel. There were also some uninvited guests, just by the way. And we sat there for 5 days, thrashing out cannabis in South Africa and how things should work, how things could work, what will work, what won't work, what should we try, what should we scrap. It was incredibly intense and incredibly exhausting. And I think that the most significant thing for me was on the very first day, I sat down at the table with our legal team, Paul Michael, who some of you might know, and Ricky Stone. And I'm looking around and I'm looking around and I'm looking, where's the cops? There's no cops. Where's the cops? So the first opportunity I got, stuck my hand up. And then I heard somebody say behind me, "Oh, here goes Myrtle." And I stood up and said, "Where's the cops?" The next day, the cops were there. And the next day in the afternoon, they actually stopped everything for the Phakisa so that us on the legal side of things could caucus. You know that word, they love it in government. We could go and caucus in a separate room and sort out what we were going to do with the cops. And that resulted in our August police directive, which I'll tell you about later. So the Phakisa has come and gone. But basically, the Phakisa was addressing every single issue that we brought up in our manifesto that was published in 2021. So Phakisa and our manifesto went very well together. After the Phakisa, apart from the police directive, we haven't seen too much action, but you know, things go slowly with government. So in the background has been this thing called the Hayes Club case. And in July this year, Fields of Green for All filed our heads of argument to be amicus curiae for the Hayes Club case. And those of you who don't know, Neil Little from the Hayes Club in Cape Town was arrested and charged with dealing in cannabis in 2019, and the brave man that he is, he decided to take his case all the way to the Constitutional Court. Unfortunately, due to a very hasty judgment by an acting judge, we lost the first round. So in the first quarter of next year, we will be in Bloemfontein at the Supreme Court of Appeal with Neil, and we, as friends of the court, are assisting the court. We're not assisting Neil, we're not assisting the government, we're assisting the court to be able to get the argument straight in their heads. So our heads of argument were accepted, we've been officially appointed as friends of the court in Bloemfontein, and right now I'm staring down the barrel of a 96,000 rands advocates bill. So we are always asking for money, but this is what we do. It's not about selling the cannabis, it's about freeing the plant. So you can go to our website, read all about the Haze Club case, and see how you can support us for less than 49 rand a month. And I think I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to go really quickly. So then in August, we went to Africa Policy Week in Cape Town. It's an amazing week-long event that was attended by myself, our content and research director, Leela Bear, and her husband, Etienne van Sale, who's a social anthropologist. We spent a week with people from all over Africa talking drug policy. And of course, that is always the best place for me to be, is talking drug policy. I'm tired of talking weed. We have to talk drug policy because, as you know, in August we got the police directive, which they are largely ignoring because the arrests continue. My friend Dave has just spent a week in Pretoria Central. I saw him a little bit earlier. So don't think that you are immune, unless, of course, you're paying the cops. But we spoke about that yesterday in the Cannabis Club's panel. So the directive was issued in August. And then in September, we did a major Dhaka Private Club's Fields of Green for All activation in Cape Town. We had the anniversary of the Concord judgment, 5 years. We also attended a Sustainable Development Goals conference online from New York City, which was always bringing us back to human rights, harm reduction, and drug policy reform. So the Sustainable Development Goals are very important to us. And then in November this year, we launched what we think is South Africa's first cannabis cooperative between ourselves at the Jazz Farm, which is the home of Fields of Green for All, between Ignited Unlimited, which trades as the Dhaka Pharmacy with an F, and also between Chiba Cannabis Academy, because we really believe in the future of the co-op, which is cooperative business between small businesses who can all help each other. So we've got our Cannabis Clubs project, and then we also have this pilot project with this cooperative, which takes the form of a cannabis nursery, which is just one type of cooperative. There's hundreds of different types of cooperatives, and they're very, very easy to register. You need 6 founding members, and the rules are not nearly as strict as for PTY Limited. So also in October, we held the 5th annual Amber Cup, which was the DAB Olympics, an amazing, amazing cannabis culture affair. We really did have fun, and sorry for you if you missed that amazing experience. And then late in October, I got my whole crew together. We had a big indaba to map the way forward for next year. That is when we narrowed down our field to the 3 things that I started with: human rights, harm reduction, and drug policy reform. We sent in more written comments of the bill, which were largely ignored. And I'm going to finish with the best news of all, which was going to America with the International Drug Policy Reform Conference. You can read about it on our website. I went with our Youth and Diversity Director, Amy Haystack, who you would have seen on a panel yesterday, and it was certainly one of the highlights of the year. We had our Labour Court of Appeal at the beginning of November because we support Bernie Innover, who is fighting for all of you not to be tested for cannabis at work. So it was Bernie versus Barloworld. We're still waiting for the judgment to come out with that one. And then we had a Cannabis Africana workshop, which was beamed out of Ghana. And we got a chance to share the Dhaka Private Club's idea with the rest of Africa. And then we had just a week ago, we had the ASTM annual conference is coming to Cape Town in January 2025. And I have to just squeeze this in because it's the Association of Standards and Trade Manuals. It is an association that's been largely American up to now, established in 1898. It's over 120 years old, and they are all about quality standards, trade manuals, and getting it right. So in this next year, you're going to hear a lot about this ASTM conference that's coming to Cape Town in January 2025. We had more civil society consultations around the bill. Now in December, we've got the 75th declaration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights coming up out of Geneva in Switzerland. We have the thematic discussions ahead of C&D in March next year. And I would just like to end off with this question. It's not over till it's over. So near and yet so far. And I stand before you as the only cannabis legalization non-profit company that has been fighting for your rights, your harm reduction, and your drug policy reform. I'm standing here as the only NGO in the building. You as businesses, please support us and let's get this right. Thank you very much.